Hello, I'm Regid Ahmed with BBC World News. Our top stories. The US presidential contender Hillary Clinton is questioned by the FBI about her use of personal emails while Secretary of State. Bangladesh's Prime Minister says the country will stand up to terror after 20 people, most of them foreigners, are killed in an Islamist attack. With more than 3/4 of the votes counted in Australia's general election, the latest projections suggest that no party will win an outright majority. Coming up later in sport today, in a huge upset, the American Sam Querrey has knocked out the defending Wimbledon champion Novak Djokovic in the third round. Hello and welcome. Hillary Clinton has been questioned by the FBI about her use of personal emails while she was US Secretary of State. A spokesman for the presumptive Democratic presidential candidate said she gave the interview voluntarily. The Bureau is investigating whether Mrs. Clinton, her aides or anyone else broke the law by setting up a private server for her use during the time she was at the State Department. Well, Laura Bicker is in Washington and has all the details. Laura, first of all, was this interview expected?
This was expected. It has been long expected, and they've chosen this holiday weekend here in the United States to interview Hillary Clinton, a weekend when she had no campaign events. We understand that she was questioned for over 3 hours during this interview with the FBI, and the campaign statement says, as you said there, that she went voluntarily. Now that means they've needed no subpoena, so she's gone there of her own accord. They also say she was pleased to help this investigation. Now, to explain to viewers at home, this was about Mrs. Clinton's use of her own email while she was Secretary of State. So she had two accounts. One was her work account and the other was her own personal account. Now, her political opponents say she used this private account, which was a misjudgment at best, which could have seen hundreds of classified documents being put into the public domain, perhaps even into the enemy of the United States' hands. So that's the accusation from her political opponents. She's always said she's done nothing wrong, and she says she used her own email account out of convenience because it was on her BlackBerry phone. So certainly two conflicting accounts, and that's why the FBI is investigating. But the timing of all this is a little awkward, to say the least. In just a few weeks, she's due to be declared as the Democratic nominee when the party meets at its convention.
Laura Bicker, thank you very much for your time. The Bangladeshi Prime Minister has pleaded with Islamic State extremists to stop killing in the name of religion after 20 people, including 9 Italians, were murdered in Dhaka. Foreign nationals were specifically targeted at a cafe last night. 6 militants were killed, with 13 hostages freed. From Dhaka, Sanjoy Majumdar reports. Well, with me now to talk about the wider implications of today's attack is Talha Ahmed, a lawyer and columnist for several Bangladeshi papers. Talha, thank you very much for your time today. First of all, given the recent history of some of the attacks in Bangladesh, are you at all surprised that this one has happened?
Yes and no. No, because Bangladesh has no precedent of such attack. And so if people were not expecting something like this, they're forgiven. But yes, in the sense that it had all the reasons why ISIS might want to target. You had the foreigners, you had all the embassies near there, and it's relatively easy to plan something like that, in that you have access to guns and explosions fairly relatively easily in Bangladesh. So surprised in the sense that it's unprecedented in Bangladesh's history. Not surprised because it's almost worth crying out for something like that.
Are we sure that Islamic State planned this attack? I know they've accepted responsibility for it.
Well, I think we can't be too certain, but if you look at the nature of the attack, it was a premeditated attack aimed at maximizing media coverage across the world. And so none of the local groups, whether it's political, petty criminals and other warring factions, they had no motive or any benefit to be gained from something like this. So it seems to be that it has all the hallmarks of being an attack orchestrated by either Islamic State centrally planned or inspired by them.
Given we've seen attacks in the past and we've seen the police attempt to deal with those involved, and yet we haven't necessarily seen charges laid, how much faith from the public is there in the police being able to really look at the whole group that might have been involved in this?
Well, for a start, Bangladesh, on any given month, about 400 to 500 murders take place in Bangladesh. None of them are investigated. So we only hear when there is something like this. So from that context, I think there is little faith. But there is a positive sign in this instance, and that is previously government was too keen to blame on the opposition. We've heard Prime Minister on these occasions. She has been, in my view, she has sounded the right soundings and had struck the right, if you like, tone. Whether it is carried out, it's yet to be seen. But there are serious questions about government's will to genuinely and objectively investigate and bring perpetrators to justice.
Tala Ahmed, thank you very much for your time. In Australia, more than 75% of the votes have been counted in the country's general election, with the result too close to call. So far, the polls are forecasting a swing away from Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull's governing coalition party, with opposition leader Bill Shorten and the Australian Labor Party holding a slender lead, according to the body in charge of the count. The magic number is 76. That's how many seats either party needs to take power. Right now, though, the polls are indicating neither will win that many, meaning there could potentially be a hung parliament. Well, despite the projection, Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull has told supporters his coalition party is on track to forming a majority government. The BBC's John Donnison was in the crowd for his speech and filed this report. And that was the leader of the Australian Labor Party, Bill Shorten, speaking there. In other news, the new leader of the Afghan Taliban says his group would consider negotiating a peace settlement if the government in Kabul severs its links with Western backers. Maulawi Hibatullah Akhundzada said the Taliban was not averse to sharing power. He also said that the presence of the US and allied forces in Afghanistan would not weaken the group. Officials investigating the crash of an Egyptair plane say the cockpit voice recorder is in a good enough condition to be examined after being repaired. 66 people were killed when the aircraft plunged into the Mediterranean in May. Investigators have confirmed there was smoke in the cabin shortly before the plane crashed, but the source of the smoke isn't clear. A gunman in Serbia has shot dead 5 people, including his wife, in a village cafe. 3 children were among 20 people who were injured in the shooting. The attack happened in the early hours of Saturday near the northeastern city of Zrenjanin, about 50 kilometres northwest of Belgrade. Thousands of people opposed to Britain's decision to leave the European Union are holding a rally outside the Houses of Parliament. The protesters marched through the streets of central London to Parliament Square. Organisers hope to stop the government triggering Article 50, which begins the formal process of withdrawal from the EU. And that referendum result has sent shockwaves around Britain, but at least one person is staying calm. Opening a new session of the Scottish Parliament, Queen Elizabeth appeared to refer to the United Kingdom's divisions. She acknowledged the difficulty of staying calm and collected in an increasingly challenging world. Coming up next, Sport Today, but do stay with BBC World News and much more on the website bbc.com/news.